I have my water glass. You guys, I love these cups, seriously. Vacuum sealed metal cup with a plastic lid is just the way to go. I'm a cold... My hair is just attached to my face at this point. I don't know. Anyway, you guys know what I'm talking about. Welcome to my channel. I'm Dani Marie AUC. Today I'm going to address some pretty important topics within the blind and visually impaired communities. Do I consider myself someone with a disability? Let's talk about it. If you guys have been watching my videos and you want to show your support, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing my videos. I really appreciate it. Over the past few years, as I've really come to know myself and accept all parts of myself, some of the things that I had to wrestle with were my own viewpoints on my blindness, my visual impairment, and disability. Disability is a really tricky one because it can really bring about some negative, stigmatizing connotations, and we struggle with that within the community and without, everyone is sort of afraid of the word disability. So, for those of you who are not within these communities, and even for those that are, who want to do this exercise, I want you to think about the word disability, and I want you to really explore what image that brings to mind. Do you think of a specific person? Do you think of a specific type of person? So what do you immediately picture? What assumptions come to mind? Are they negative? And if they are, that's okay, because we've all been at that point. The idea is to recognize those negative thoughts, those negative stigmas, the things that those around you have led you to believe about disability, and the things that society has led you to believe about disability. We want to recognize those negative thoughts and assumptions and realize that the world is a much bigger place than we once thought. And if that's true of the world, then it must be true of each human being that lives in the world. We are complex human beings, capable of holding more than one idea at once, capable of growing and changing, if we choose that path. So let's choose that path together. So what is a disability? This is what the internet defines a disability as. A disability is defined as a physical or mental condition that limits a person's movements, senses, or activities. It is a disadvantage or handicap, especially one imposed or recognized by the law. We'll talk more about that word choice later in the video, don't worry. If we take that definition, we can then say that a disability is a condition or something in a person's life that makes that person's life more challenging or more difficult to navigate. There are so many conditions that fall into this category, from the obvious to the invisible. Some well-recognized disabilities, for example, are mobility issues or amputations. The general public tends to notice a person walking with a cane or crutches or in a wheelchair. It's more out there in the open. On the other hand, we have invisible disabilities. These are things that aren't out in the open, but that are just as impactful on a person's life as that person with a mobility issue or the person with an amputation. Now, I'm not saying all disabilities are the same, but the common theme here is that a disability can be considered something that makes a person's everyday life activities more challenging. So some of these invisible disabilities include blindness, deafness, developmental delays, as well as mental illness, and so many more. If you're watching this and you have a disability and I've left it out, I apologize. If you feel comfortable, you are very welcome to share about yourself and about your disability below to help spread a little bit of awareness. That's completely up to you. Also, I want everyone to feel included in this channel. You do not have to be blind or visually impaired to be here. You don't have to have albinism to be here. I may not be able to cover every topic from every perspective here, but I want you to know that I am open to hearing your perspective. I am open to new life experiences, and especially those that I may not know about. So if you ever have something like that to share with me, please feel free to do so in a comment or on my social media, which you can find in my channel page. If we can spread just a small amount of awareness and acceptance and openness and appreciation and respect for everyone, I feel like this channel for me would have been successful. We have established that disability is something that can make your life challenging. You may have workarounds. You may have things you do that compensate for whatever your disability may be. You may be successful and happy. Most of us are, don't get me wrong. The point here is that however successful you are, however many workarounds and creative ways to do things you have in your life, that part of you is still affecting your life. It affects how you do day-to-day things and more. Let me give you some small examples. These are just day-to-day general examples. I can't generally see how much liquid I'm pouring into a glass, especially if it's water and it's a clear glass. I struggle with that one especially. So sometimes I'll fill my glass up and I'll put my finger in it. Over here like this with this little claw finger. But I'll put my finger in it and then I'll be able to gauge when the water is the level that I want it. This is such a small, tiny workaround that is so easy for me to do. I don't even need any special tools for it. Another example, someone who uses a cane, they may walk around, find the ramp instead of stepping up onto the curb. This is a small adjustment in most cases, but it's an adjustment nonetheless. Another one, consider someone with anxiety, especially social anxiety. They may do a breathing exercise before they get out of the car to go into the supermarket. They may do a breathing exercise or something to ground them inside the supermarket, and then they may do another when they get back out to their car. These things may not take up a ton of their time. It is something that a person has to do to compensate for some aspect of his or her life. There are endless examples. We could really go on all day long with anything from small trivial changes to monumental ones. That's not to say that a person with any of these conditions or disabilities cannot live a perfectly happy, fulfilled life. They absolutely can, and they do. The point here is that whatever your condition is, there are changes that you have to make in your life to compensate or accommodate for that condition that you're dealing with. It affects your life every single day. There's no getting around that. Do I view myself as someone with a disability? I didn't as a kid. I didn't know much about disability as a kid. I didn't know much about it as a teenager. I didn't know how much my vision would impact my adult life. But now, after a few years of being an adult and another few years of having a chance to really sit with my own thoughts on the topic and feelings about it and just taking that time to really understand myself, I do consider myself a person with a disability. I feel like there is an amount of pride that comes with that decision. Embracing the term disability is similar to the change in mindset that I went through as I learned to call myself a blind or visually impaired person. Before, I was generally comfortable with the term legally blind, like, hey, I'm legally blind, blah, 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 and I would, talk about it a little bit. But once I learned to embrace that label, or that part of myself that wasn't going away, it really changed my perspective on blindness and visual impairment. I've written what I consider to be a pretty cool post on this topic called Coming Out as Blind, Embracing the Label, Not the Limitations, where I discuss what it's like to feel in between. What it's like to feel sort of trapped in between the sighted community and the blind community as a visually impaired person with functional vision. There are so many of us who feel that in-between feeling, and we feel like we don't belong in either space because we're not completely sighted. We can't do everything like all the sighted people out there can. But we're not completely blind. We can use some of our vision. I'm here to tell you, very, very small percentage of the population who is blind is completely blind. So, having said that, I want to tell you that you do belong. You belong here. You belong in the blind and visually impaired communities. You belong with the rest of us on the spectrum that is blindness. Going into that decision to embrace the blind or legally blind label was terrifying for me. I thought it was going to tear me down and it was going to make me a lesser person. But that was my own negative stigma getting in my way. I was getting in my own way. And you might be too. Once I embraced that label, it gave me power. It gave me a way to name my struggle, and then it gave me a community of people who were dealing with so many of the same things that I was dealing with every day. It gave me a place to feel safe, to feel at home. And that's where I'm at now. I'm building that community. I'm building my own circle, my own family, so to speak. And it has meant the world to me, truly. If that sounds at all like you, welcome, because you have found your place, you've found your people, and you are welcome here. This topic, if you can't tell, this topic means so much to me because I felt so alone and I thought I was so unjustified in those feelings because of my inexperience with the blind and visually impaired community and with some of my experiences I had had with others in the community who I had spoke to individually. I'll save those stories for another video. So let's address some of the terms that many of us in the community of people who are disabled generally dislike. Differently abled. This phrase is so cringeworthy. Oh, it is so cringeworthy. This one belittles us. It infantilizes us. It turns us into little children like, oh, don't worry about so-and-so. She's just differently abled. She's fine. What? Why? Who thought that would be a good idea? Oh, I don't even know, but you get the idea. The next one is handicapped. This term is so old. It is literally from the 17th century. It doesn't have anything to do with a disability. It once referred to extra weight added to a superior horse in a horse race so as to even the odds. It's also used in golf and I think a few other sports. It can stay there. Let's just leave it in golf. Next, terms like suffers from, is confined to a wheelchair, and the disabled. As if we are all one thing. This term, any of these terms, really turns us into objects. We're poor, pitiful people who suffer from blah, 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 and they're just confined to a wheelchair, blah, blah, blah. Do you see where I'm coming from? It turns us into objects, for one. Two, it makes us all seem like we're just miserable, unhappy people just suffering from our blindness and deafness and dying miserably in our wheelchairs. No, this is just inaccurate. And it's just wrong. Things that are more acceptable are generally person-first language. So person in a wheelchair, person with a disability, person who is blind. Wheelchair user is also what I've heard, and I honestly cannot speak for the community of people who are wheelchair users. I do hope that's not offensive, because it seems like it is more of someone who's using a wheelchair as opposed to someone confined to a wheelchair. That's like me if someone were to say I'm a cane user, or people or guide dog users. That to me doesn't feel offensive. It's just describing you as someone who is using a tool to live your best life. Generally, the idea is to focus on the person first. We're not objects, we're not the disabled, we're not lepers, so stop talking about disabled people like they're lepers. Generally, we should treat every person we meet with respect, because that is what we expect in an ideal world. And if we want an ideal world, we have to create it. It won't just make itself, and it won't just grow out of nothing. So let's create it, one small, respectful gesture at a time. If you guys have thoughts on this topic, please share them below in a comment or reach out on social media. I love hearing everybody's thoughts on this topic because it is such a varied one with so many varied opinions and perspectives, especially from those of you who watch who have different disabilities or conditions, who are dealing with different struggles. I honestly love the enlightenment that comes from just speaking with someone who has a different struggle than you. It honestly makes me feel like I'm growing as a person, and I appreciate anyone who is willing to reach out and share a part of themselves with me. So, thank you for watching. Please, if you want to support my channel, like, subscribe, and share my videos to anyone you think might be interested. Until next time, stay curious. Bye.